All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Leslie? Where's Leslie? Leslie here?
He's there.
Oh, no, that's Amanda for me. Leslie, you want to call the roll?
Oh, goodness. Yes. Josh Altum.
Present.
Chris Pugh.
Here.
Sandra Lee.
Here.
And Linda Rhodes.
Here.
And Chad Wandell.
Here.
Mayor, are you here?
Yes, mentally, yes.
Good deal.
All right, items on the work session. Presentation of the CAFR.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask Lakita if she would introduce our auditor and proceed with that presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope everyone is healthy this evening. I am going to be introducing in just a minute Danny Martinez from BKD. What we're doing this evening is, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We're asking the council for acceptance of the 2019 CAFR. You've been provided with the draft copy. The reason that it's still a draft is because, of course, the council has not yet accepted it, which is what we're doing this evening. But the auditors are satisfied with it, and so is city staff. We have included a report that details to the council where you can find pertinent information about where we ended the year. Specifically, we included a section with budgetary highlights where you can see where the audited numbers compare to what was budgeted for fiscal year 19. And so you see the main difference on both of those is you would see an improvement in fund balance, which is great, because now that we know that we had an improvement on fund balance on at least 6 major funds, we will carry a more positive fund balance over into fiscal year 20. So when we bring to you a budget amendment later in the year, you'll be able to see some improvement in those fund balances that carry over. We have also included the management letter for fiscal 19, and hopefully you had a chance to read through that. The auditor did deem the audit as being successful. The city had 2 findings from last year. And while we did not have any new findings, we did carry over those 2 findings from last year. And we can kind of talk more about those if you have questions about those at the end. But basically, they were year-end closing procedures and segregation of duties. The segregation of duties had more to do with turnover in the finance department. And you know, of course, when you have 1 person or 2 people, they're going to be, that person is going to be doing a lot of tasks. So you don't have that specific segregation of duties and some of the internal control there that you would normally have when you're fully staffed. And the other finding had to do with year-end closing procedures. And the audit this year took a little bit longer than we would have liked for it to take. The auditors had their first visit to the city in January, and financial analyst Debbie and myself worked with them very closely. We put a lot of work into it. We did run into some bumps in the road. One of them had to do with the departure of Fathom. When Fathom went out of business, we were left scrambling a little bit with end of year reports. So end of year reports that we normally receive in order to book accounts receivables for the year were unavailable. And we had to work together with the auditor to come up with those receivables. And that was a great task. And we wanted to make sure that we were thorough, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't hurry through it. Because with this being my first audit for the city, I wanted to really comb through it and learn a lot about what happened last year. as some of you can probably relate, when you're being audited on work that's not your own work, you have to really do your research and try to go into the brain of another individual and figure out why they booked things the way that they did. So a few things contributed to why there was a delay there, but I wanted to kind of talk to the council about it. And of course, you know, for a little while last year, Debbie was appointed for interim director of finance, and she did not return to the city until January of audit year. And so when she arrived, the audit was already wrapping up. So this audit, we essentially only had one payroll person on staff who was still here from last year's audit. So we really wanted to just take our times, dig into some things, reconcile, fathom accounts receivable the best that we could in absence of the reports. And we were able to come out successful. So, and the only other thing we have before this staff accepts the CAFR this evening, we did invite Mr. Martinez, which we worked very closely with from BKD, to present council with a presentation to walk through it in a little bit more detail. And then at the end, you'll have a chance to ask questions if you have any remaining questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Danny Martinez.
All right, Greg. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. Let me pull this up. I will share screen 2. And all right, can you all see the presentation?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again. Yeah, I understand you all have a lot of important things on the agenda tonight, so I will be brief, but I will walk you through this presentation of the audit. So this is the audit for the year ended September 30, 2019, the period October 1st, 2018 to September 30, 2019. So that is the period that we're going to be going over. As Lakita said, we're about a month later than normal. That was a decision that we made jointly back in January. You know, we think to Lakita's point, being her first year, having a little bit of difficulties with Fathom as far as getting reports, and then just wanting to make sure that we had everything in line. So we're about a month later than normal on that. We did get the extension from GFOA in order to ensure you all still receive your certificate for the CAFR. So we lined that up in advance, and so we will be working on issuing that, with the City of Canada tomorrow once we get your approval on this draft. So this is the agenda. We'll kind of breeze through these items here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. The first thing that we're going to touch on is the audit results. So at the end of the day, you hire us to provide an opinion on your financial statements, and we are giving reasonable assurance that those financial statements are free of material misstatement. The reason that we say reasonable assurance is because we audit on a test basis. We don't look at every single transaction the city enters into, but we look at it risk-based based off of the transactions that you've entered into during the year, preliminary analytics that we do, and we determine what is material and how we should approach our audit. As you can see, we're giving an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion available on your financial statements. In addition, we have an internal control report over financial reporting and compliance and other matters that we'll touch on here in a second, but that's really where you get any types of findings or control deficiencies or compliance items that we identify. So in that 90-page or 80-page CAFR that you all have, in the front, you will see our opinion. It's a 3-page letter that details out this financial statement opinion. As you're going through the CAFR, if you're wanting to read through and understand the results, I would recommend going through the management discussion and analysis. That's pages 4 through 9, and it goes through in a narrative format what happened with the city during the year. You know, what improved, what financial matters did not improve, and why. And you know, so if you're looking at the 80-page CAFR and wondering where do I start, that pages 4 to 9 of the CAFR is a great place to start. What we'd like to share with you all just for a brief moment is what do we do, right? We go through, we give you this 80-page document, a bunch of numbers in there. We say, hey, clean opinion, you're fine. So what actual steps did we perform? So I want to highlight here a few of the audit areas and the steps that we performed. We walked through all of your significant transaction cycles. So areas where your cash is coming in, cash is going out. Also look at your investing, your capital assets, and we gain an understanding of your design and your operations. You know, who has the authority to approve, review, post to your accounting system? You know, how does that all work together? Because if we don't understand that, it's really difficult to audit that. In addition, for your accounts receivable, we confirm material balances. We also vouch subsequent receipts. So if it was due at the end of September, did you all receive payment on those? We also look at your allowances, and do your allowances make sense based off what you've been collecting? Net pension liability and OPEB. We received the actuarial report for your portion of TMRS. We test the information that you're submitting as far as census data, and then we verify you have all the disclosures necessary. For long-term debt, we verified those new issuances, so we tied your tax notes to the agreements, made sure that those were booked correctly. We also confirmed payments during the year. So just a really quick flavor of what we do. Next is required communications. So this is that management letter that you all also have, and this is just in summary form what we have to communicate in accordance with standards. The first is significant estimates. Not every single balance in the CAFR can be tied to an invoice. Some of these are estimates. The allowance for your accounts receivable, for example, your depreciable lives, how long an asset is going to live, how much you're going to owe on your pension and OPEB, and how well that's funded. You know, there's a lot of assumptions that go into the number that you get put as your liability. So there's nothing that we identified with those estimates that we thought was unreasonable given your status as a municipality in Texas, but we are required to communicate that there are estimates in your financial statements. We did not identify any issues with the quality of the accounting principles that you followed. You followed the governmental accounting standards appropriately. Financial statement disclosures, if you're going to look at any, your capital assets, your pension and OPEB reports, and also any loss contingencies, those would be areas you'd want to focus on. And the rest of this, we just like to refer to this as none or none noted. If you just see none, you should feel great. Were there any issues with the quality of the client's accounting policies? None. Anything else disclosed outside of the usual? None. And then, as you can see here on this next slide, no disagreements with management, no significant issues outside of what we normally go through as we're working collaboratively on the audit. No going concern issues. No other material communications, meaning this presentation, the CAFR, the management letter, anything of importance related to this audit, you all were made aware of throughout the course of the audit. Next section, the findings, and Lakita already touched on these. I think she did a great job in giving the why behind these items. So the great news is that there were no additional items identified during the year. When we report issues with controls, we have 3 levels. The first level and the highest level is a material weakness, and so we had none of those. The second level is a significant deficiency, which we say it's less than what we think is a material weakness, but we still want to let governance know that we identified these, as you all are working through operations and management of the city, just that you're aware of those. There's a lower level called a control deficiency that we had none of, and we did not know any non-compliance with laws or regulations throughout the course of our audit, which is another thing we're required to relate to. So the 2 that we identified related to the year-end close process and segregation of duties. I'll start with the second one first. Segregation of duties really for a city of your size is a cost benefit analysis. You know, you're not going to necessarily want to put in place a position, you know, an FTE, to have the segregation of duties where every single transaction that is prepared by someone else is reviewed by someone else and then is input by a third person. You know, you're really weighing the cost benefit relation to it. Some smaller entities we do see bringing in city council maybe a little bit more to come in and perform a review on a more routine basis. Some other places, you know, they say we feel pretty comfortable with where we are. So now, as Lakita is going to have a full year under her belt, you know, she'll probably have an even better understanding of where she wants to tighten up those duties. The second one relates to the year-end close process. So from the final trial balance we receive to what you all are given in that CAFR, there's some accounting that goes on there with the different journal entries we need to book. And what Lakita and I discussed is that this summer, we're going to go through and make sure that for each of these closing entries that you all have the controls in place as far as the templates that you need to be able to book those journal entries. Because in some places, you have great templates to where, oh, this transaction happened, this is what we do at year end. But in other places, you know, there's still a little bit of assistance that we have to provide because we haven't taken the time to work with you all, with Lakita, to identify, you know, where you all can take more responsibility for that. So that's something that me and Lakita have in mind for this summer. Very briefly, you know, financial trends. We're already 6-7 months out from when this information is from. But as far as your revenues from 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, you can see that your taxes and fees was about 55% of your revenue, and your charges for services were about 41% of your revenue, for a total of $14.2 million. On the expenses side, you can see that public safety was your largest expense at 38%. And then I believe that water and sewer was 29%, with public works and general government coming in third and fourth. Your general fund balance, you know, Lakita's going to talk to you a little bit about that in relation to budget. But you can see that at the end of 2019, you had about 32% of a full year's worth of expenditures, meaning if you did not receive one more dollar into your general fund, you would have been able to last for about 4 months. Usually anything over 25% is a good range in there. This is your government-wide tax revenue, and this includes franchise fees, but you can see steady increases over the last 3 fiscal years: 6.5, 7.4, and $7.9 million. To close, just want to let you all know there are a couple big standards coming up. However, with COVID-19, these are both very, very likely to be delayed by an additional fiscal year. So you're not necessarily going to have a new standard to implement in this next audit. Also want to let you all know that we are putting together a webinar for public sector for everything that you need to be thinking about, you know, with COVID-19, with the new grants that you're going to be getting in, any FEMA money, what's going to be happening with that money that's hopefully coming from the state of Texas. I feel like it's changing on a daily basis, so maybe you all have heard since now, but we will be having a webinar on that next Thursday morning. Myself and another one of our public sector leaders are presenting. I would encourage Lakita to attend, and any of you all from the city are more than welcome to come. Here is my contact information if you all want to discuss any of these items with me further. Totally understand that you all have a lot to go through today, so we will open it up to questions now, or if you would like to, you know, pass that along and defer it to later, I'd be more than happy to discuss offline. I also want to let you all know, once you all approve this, like I said at the beginning, we will work through and get this issued to the GFOA so you all can get your certificate tomorrow.
All right, questions. Chad, any questions? Linda, any questions?
Yes. I had to unmute it, sorry. I don't know if I should ask now or wait, direct this question to Lakita. It's specific questions like to the CAFR pages.
Go ahead.
Okay, on page 10, it's the statement of net position page. And there were just a couple of items. Let me make sure I've got the right thing here. Actually, that was another question, but I'll go ahead and ask that now. Hi. On page 10, under deferred outflows of resources, the second item listed there, sorry, it's tiny writing, deferred outflows of resources for pension, and it shows over $1 million. I think last year it was like 390,000. Do we know why that was such a significant difference, or?
Danny, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, is that I believe that's just attributed to the pension expense and the gas fee that we have to do with the reporting of that. Every year there's going to be a fluctuation based on how much the city is actually contributing. Are we contributing to the minimum? And also how much the city is actually earning on you know, the money that we have in the pension, the investments. So, you know, I mean, every year it's going to fluctuate. And Danny, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Right. So that number is made up of two items, and Lakita hit it exactly. That your contributions after when the dated measurement for our TMRS, but also the big piece in there was the difference of what was projected to be earned on those investments. You know, they take a guess, right? The actuaries take a guess, and then the actual investment results at the end of the year, that difference gets recorded in that deferred outflow. And so the investments actually did better than expected during this measurement period for the TMRS investments. And so that is showing that you all have that deferred outflow, which is an accounting term, but it's just most of that is because investments did better than TMRS expected.
Okay. And then also it looks like there's a couple of maybe new categories that we have added on this page. One of them being the tax notes payable and both of them, tax notes payable under liabilities, and then bonds under the bonds. Is that what was it added just for what reason, I guess, is the question.
So those are, you all had entered into two different tax notes during the year. One was it looks like a 3-year note for
Okay.
2,000, and one was a 7-year note for $2 million. And so that is reflective of those items that were entered into, and you all didn't have in a prior year.
Okay. And just to clarify, this is on the agenda tonight as acceptance of. We're not approving anything really per se. We're just saying, council as a whole is saying that we're accepting this CAFR report as presented. And I know that there's a lot of other questions out there that I've had people ask me, but for time's sake, I guess those concerns can be specifically addressed with Lakita. Maybe the resident can contact her directly. But for time's sake for tonight, again, council is just accepting the report.
Yes, that is correct. And if any citizen or council member, if there is more explanation that you want or that you need that you don't feel like it's spelled out in the CAFR, I know a lot of the terminology in there is accounting based, and it may not be as easy to understand. So I will welcome anyone to just email me questions, and I'd be happy to address them if I can. If not, I'll pass them over to Danny and the team.
Thank you. That's all.
Danny, to follow up on her pension question, are we going to see a fluctuation in the pension with COVID-19 and its impact on markets?
It's a great question. So the measurement date for TMRS is the end of the calendar year. So next year's audit will be based off of life at 12/31/2019. So at 12/31/2019, things were still humming along quite well. Now, depending on how things go the rest of 20, in 2 years financial statements, you could see if there's not a recovery, it swing again the other way to where it looks like, oh, pension isn't as funded because, you know, we had a bad year compared to what we anticipated. So for next year's, it'll still look okay. 2 years from now, it really just depends how this recovery rolls out.
Thank you. Sandra,
No, Linda asked my question about the pension.
okay. Chris,
No questions, but if possible, if maybe Leslie could forward us his presentation at a later time, I'd just like to have that summary report.
and then Josh.
I have a quick question on page 4. It says we're in a deficit of 2.5 million. Does that have anything to do with Fathom or?
So the unrestricted, that deficit in your statement of net position, a large portion of that is related to the pension liability and the OPEB liability. And so what we're saying is a lot of your net position is housed in the value of your capital assets. There's additional funding that you have restricted for certain items. For you all, for operations, I would probably lean towards looking at the fund statements, which start on page 12, rather than the government-wide statements, because for whatever reason, GASB has layered on, you know, pension and OPEB items, which do matter. But as far as trying to identify year to year where you're at with your equity or your net position, that's probably not the best marker. So although it looks like you all have a deficit of a couple million, it really is just pension and OPEB guesses as to what that liability is for your employees, you know, far out in the future.
And then I have one last question on page 60, when it breaks down the government activities unrestricted. In 2015, it was 215, 16, 289, 17, 457, and so on. But in 2019, you have in parentheses over 5 million. So I'm just kind of curious as to what's that all about. I mean, I know it equals out underneath, but why is that number in there like that in parentheses? When you go from 2018 to almost 500,000 to 2019, you have over 5 million written in there. So
we looked, large portion of that is, so you can see the in total, it balances.
I see the totals equal out, but I'm just kind of curious.
So a big portion of that is your tax notes. So your tax note, the way it's booked, you have a liability for the 3 million. And so that brings down that balance, but the cash that you all have related to it gets put into this net investment of capital assets. So because it's the net position in the accrual accounting, it's just where those things get booked whenever you enter into a large or enter into any debt like that.
That's all I have.
I just want to make sure, because we got the question from Valerie. Valerie, did we answer your question, or did you have a follow-up on that? We're getting that through chat, Danny.
Okay.
Yes, and oh, he has a flow up, or she does. What's your follow up? They're texting.
I can see.
You can see it.
I can see Valerie's question. It's the same thing. I mean, it points to the way that it has to be booked. It points to the debt that was taken out. So if you look at approximately 2.7 million that we took out in tax notes in fiscal 19, that is where that's booked at. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think he has a follow up. And is typing very slowly. Okay.
There's a revenue question. And
Yes.
the tax rate. So yes, I mean, so that chart that I showed you all, let me find it. And it's taking into account property tax, sales tax, and franchise. It still was up, looks like 6.5% from the prior year. And let me find another place where you all can see that information. On page, just to mark that down for you, on page 67 is a good place where you can see for the last 5 fiscal years how all of your revenues have progressed. So the tax revenue went from if you're excluding franchise fees, just sales and property tax, it went from 6.7 million to 7.15 million.
George, that might be a question you can answer from Rocky to say, so the grim predictions of catastrophe by going with the effective tax rate did not occur? George?
No, I don't. I'm not sure I understand the grim predictions from, say it again, Brian.
That we were gonna have some fund balance problems with the tax cut. Are we having those fund balance problems?
Understand that we're not, this is all in the current fiscal year. So the current fiscal year is where we had the real low fund balance, and we're trying to work to make sure that doesn't happen. The improvement in the fund balance in the year that was audited, that we're talking about, should help us overcome that incredibly low fund balance that had been predicted for the current fiscal year. So we don't know the answer to that question yet, but we're trying to do expenditure savings, and combined with any better than programmed fund balance that this audit might show, we hope will help us overcome the problem in the current fiscal year. Lakita, chime in if that's not.
Yeah, I think that is correct, George. I think the question is kind of pointed to the original deficit that was projected for fiscal 19. Originally in the budget, we expected to end the year with 1.1 million of fund balance in the general fund. But when we did budget projections towards the end of the year, we saw an improvement in that, and we at that time projected that we would be in a better position at 1.4 million. So we actually ended the year with the audit, even improvement over that with 1.5 million. So according to the audit, I think your question is, according to the audit, we did not end up with the deficit that we originally thought that we had. Now, you have to look at each particular revenue source to see why we ended more significantly with over what we budgeted, because property tax isn't the only source. We also brought in more sales tax than we originally anticipated. So hopefully that gets us closer to answering that question.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions on the council about the CAFR? If not, we're going to move on to the next issue because we've got a pretty busy agenda. Anybody? All right. Well, thank you, Danny.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. Look forward to be in touch with you tomorrow.
Thank you, Danny. Good night.
Night.
All right. The next item on the agenda is whole discussion regarding the development of economic assistance programs. George?
Thank you, Mayor. Remember that at the end of March, we visited with the city council about the potential to go into and create some kind of an economic assistance program for local small businesses. And it was conceptual at that point. The council gave us the go-ahead to continue to look at the possibility of creating an assistance program of some type. But as we did the research on that and looked at what the federal programs were offering to small businesses and identified the only source of funding that the city had, which was essentially about $150,000 in EDC funding, we began to wonder whether or not and question whether or not the city and the EDC providing that kind of assistance in any form would negatively impact small businesses' ability to apply for and qualify for forgivable loans from the SBA. So as we looked into that, we also developed a second program, and I've given you in your packet an outline, both the original outline of a grant program that we had talked about in March and the possibility of a more promotional type of program could put together that would essentially partner with local businesses to advertise shopping Kennedale first and creating a better, stronger economic environment. But either one of those programs, the information that we were learning would potentially provide some option or opportunity that any SBA loans that the participants got or the PPP program might wind up being offset by anything the city gave them. So we're continuing to look at that, but aren't quite ready to make a recommendation on anything at this point. We did go to the EDC board on April the 13th and talked about the possibility of both of these types of programs with the EDC board. Obviously, the $150,000 that we had identified is really EDC money. And just to summarize, the consensus, I think, of the EDC board was that it's probably premature for us to try to grant some kind of assistance directly with funding to local small businesses. Although and Melissa later on the next agenda item is going to talk about some things we are doing, but that it was premature to try to use cash until we knew what the results of the federal programs were. And I know some of you all have probably all seen the headlines today that the Congress, the Senate at least today, has approved another round of funding that's significant. So, and the state has implemented some programs. So the bottom line is that the EDC board recommendation was that we not go into a direct grant program or this kind of a partnership program with our limited funding at this point, but wait and see how the programs at the federal and state level are working out and whether or not there might be a better way to use any funds we have when the recovery starts and to help those businesses get back in operation. So right now, Mayor, I'd be happy for you to chime in. I know you listened to that conversation with the EDC board, but I think the conclusion of that board was we wait and we continue to evaluate the options and do some other things. Now, they did approve and authorize us to do for a couple of tenants of the small business tenants of the EDC to do a rent deferment for on 30 days at a time, and right now for perhaps April and May, not a forgiveness of that rent, but a deferment until we can determine that their business can reestablish, and we'll work out some way for them to pay that rent back over perhaps a year's time. And there's only a couple of tenants that would apply to. So right now, we're kind of on hold unless the council wanted to proceed in some direction other than what the EDC provided. And again, in the next agenda item, Melissa is going to talk about a program that we have started to try to help businesses and help the economy in Kennedale to the extent that we can. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mayor, or let you chime in on my characterization of what the EDC board concluded.
Well, I did talk to the county and finally got an answer from their SBA, and they said if we were to give them grant money, they would have to report that as revenue and would impact their money they would get from the federal government. It could lower that money. So in other words, we would pay and then the federal government would just give them less. So we're essentially paying the federal government.
Right. In the program that we were talking about, I think that's the conclusion that we came to.
And I think what Fort Worth is doing, Fort Worth is just doing 0% loans for 12 months. And that's what they're using their EDC money for.
That's kind of what I was going to suggest, was that 380 agreement is to give them loans instead of a grant and just 0% interest, and they can pay it back. That way, eventually we won't be out of pocket.
Well, right now, we've got the new federal program that is hopefully going to be approved this week by both houses. We've got the governor has implemented a program at the state level. And of course, the governor is also considering ways to gradually phase businesses back into operation. We don't know how that's going to work out yet, whether it's premature, whether it's going to have a positive impact on the economy in Kennedale or not. But there are several moving parts here. And my suggestion, recommendation is that we just put the loan program kind of on the back burner for the time being and continue to evaluate it as closely as we can.
Any questions, Chad?
No,
Chad?
no questions for me.
Okay, Linda?
No, thank you.
Sandra?
No.
Josh?
No, sir.
Chris?
No, sir. I would prefer to support the EDC at this point. It sounds like they want to wait and see, so I'm fine with that as well.
All right, George, you got your direction?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, next item, receive a report and hold discussions of operation issues relating to the COVID emergency.
Well, Mayor, most of the things that we're doing from a city organization perspective, I'm trying to keep you up with as we go, you know, what facilities we have that are closed and some employees working. But I wanted to list this on the agenda, particularly because the planning department has initiated some other programs with local businesses. And I'd just like Melissa to take a few minutes and describe what that is and what we're doing and what the reaction to it has been thus far, as long as it's been in place. So Melissa, with that, if you would.
Sure. So we did also talk to the EDC about a shop local campaign. And I think that was one of the things they were looking at to perhaps fund businesses to do a sort of a marketing campaign. But really, regardless of, you know, where the city ends up in terms of funding for businesses, direct funding, we knew we could initiate a campaign of shop local. And so we've been working over the last week on that. And if it's okay, Megan's should be on, and she's got just a very short little slide presentation to kind of show you some of the visuals and where we are on that.
Hi, everyone. Can you
Megan.
see me, hear me? Okay.
So she's going to share her screen.
I'm Megan, for those of you who might not have seen me in a while. So I'm going to show you guys just a few things about this program that we're working on. So let's see. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
We can see it, Megan.
Perfect. So we are calling this Shop Local campaign for the love of Kennedale, Shop Local, which is a mouthful. You can just call it Shop Kennedale. I think I'm having some loading problems. If you'll give me just 1 second to get it to go. Here we go. So The first and biggest thing I want you guys to be aware of is we've created a shop local website. It's called shopkennedale.org. Should be really easy to remember. This website will aggregate all of the businesses' information. So we're asking businesses to let us know what their hours of operation look like, if they've been altered due to COVID, or if they've closed entirely to the public, so that people are aware of it. And then they'll also list any online services or shopping opportunities that they have, or if it's food related, then options for people to purchase food through them and ways to do that. There's a sign up page for businesses so that we can collect their information, and it's really easy to link and share on social media. It's nice and catchy, shopkennedale.org. We're hoping that the community will come together and help spread the word about this through word of mouth. So I'm going to show you guys what this looks like. And I think I'm gonna have to actually switch the screen over. All right, so this is what the website looks like on the landing page. We've got a short message to let people know what this is about, the fact that it's coming from the city, to make sure that people know it's legitimate. So when they click to shop local, they have 3 categories right now. We've gotten a great response. So far, we've had quite a few businesses respond wanting to be listed. So these right now are the 3 categories, but I have a feeling that this is going to broaden, and we're going to have to play with the way that this is displayed, because I think we're going to have a lot of participation. So an example of how I would use this, I'm in Kennedale and I'm thinking about driving all the way to Mansfield or Arlington to eat, but then I remember shopkennedale.org and I check out food options, and I see that I can order something for pickup or delivery from Bravo. I can have delivery from Burger Box. I know I just need DoorDash, Grubhub, or Seamless. And on. I can learn lots about lots of different businesses. These are businesses that I think we're all really familiar with at this point, being that we work at the city. Some of us live in the city, so we're aware of them, but not everyone may be. And on the other side of that, you may be aware of it, just not feeling the pull to keep your money at home. And so we're hoping that this is a way to help people do that. And remind people that there's an easy platform for finding out where they can go. So a few of the other things we're doing, we're developing print materials. We'll have banners displayed at a few really prime locations, signs that'll be displayed in yards and in front of stores, and then posters that people can post at their businesses, whether they're closed or not, to help direct traffic to that website. And then that website will direct the traffic back into these businesses. And then hopefully it'll get people to reach out and go to different businesses that they normally don't. So this is an example of what some of those distributive materials look like. So the banner on the left, these are the yard signs on the right. Let me know if you'd like one. We'd love to post as many of these as we can. We'll be working with Leslie on social media. She's kind of the social media guru, so she'll be helping us out with that. We're going to step a little bit out of our comfort zone and use Instagram. That's something that's, I think, new for the city. I don't think we have an Instagram account for the city, but we'd like to use Instagram to engage people and help spread the word further. Everybody loves to share things about their favorite businesses. So, and we're reaching out to businesses directly. We've been talking to businesses about what they need, what they'd like to have us include in this program. I'm hoping to develop some newsletters to send out regarding assistance and resources. So as those become available, as we find out about things in North Texas or further out, we'll be able to connect people with those resources because they're signing up through this list, giving us their contact info. And it also gives us the ability to adapt this on the fly based on what's working and what's not. So that's everything I wanted to tell you guys in this update. That's what we're up to over in planning and economic development.
And we did receive the outdoor signs in today, actually, about 5 o'clock. So we'll be distributing those. We've had quite a few requests for those, so you'll start seeing those around the city. And then the posters will be ready tomorrow as well, and we'll start getting those distributed.
Questions, Josh?
Yeah, I just want to say that, man, I love that idea. It's awesome that we're doing that. I did have a question. Is there any way, like along the Parkway or Sublet on the power poles or something, do one of those banners? You know how they do, like shop local Kennedale, You know what I'm talking about? I don't know
Yeah.
what they're called. Is there any way we can do that along the parkway or along the major thoroughfares on the pole?
We are having banners printed, and we're looking at putting those in some key locations. For example, the EDC owns that lot at Dick Price and Kennedale Parkway. We'll put one there, since this is basically EDC funded. And be happy to entertain any other ideas for some prominent locations. But yes, we're about to have a number of banners printed that we would be putting in strategic places. I think they're 8 foot long.
Yeah.
The really positive part of this is that this is promoting the economic activity in Kennedale, not just for the businesses that are participating. So it's got a very broad appeal. And I think the insight and the initiative to do this is something that we're going to want to keep going long after this COVID crisis is over with, because it certainly is a positive way to promote the city of Kennedale.
Chris, any questions?
You said you have yard signs, Melissa. Are those like a sign, like a campaign size sign, or what do you mean by
Yeah.
a yard sign?
They're 24 by 24. And if you want one, we'll come and put it out for you.
Yes, you can bring me a couple. I'm sure I know a couple of people that would be willing to put it up. And I know a couple of people I'll have contact you that have frontage on a major road that might be willing to do what they can to support the city.
Okay.
We have a lot of long-term families here that have property along Sublet Road, which maybe we could turn somebody around from going to Burger King and have them come back and go to Burger Box.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just, if you just shoot us an email, we'll get some to you, Chris. Shoot us an email, or you can go on that webpage and request signs there.
Sandra?
Oh,
Your mute sign, Sandra. You're mute.
I just want to say y'all are doing a great job. I mean, y'all did this quick because we only asked about it a couple of weeks ago, and you already have the site up and running. So I just want to say thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Linda?
Yes, it looks very good. Thank you.
Chad?
Yeah, this is fantastic, guys. Bravo on the work. Definitely something we need to keep moving forward, even after all this settles down and goes away, because, especially for people that are new to our community that don't know where everything is and didn't even know that these were options in our city. I think it's a great way just to go, this is what's here, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Share it on social media. Let people know about it.
All right, well, thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, so next up is receive a report regarding the current status of utility customer service and billing issues.
Mayor, I referred to you on this at your last meeting and have provided in your agenda packet an informal staff report that outlines what occurred on the billing issue, repeats some of what you heard last time, and kind of gives you an update on where we are. I can go through all of that and summarize it now, or answer questions if you have it about it. We tried to provide as much information in that report as possible.
Summarize, George.
Okay. Well, let me go back and essentially tell you that obviously everybody knows that we're trying to transition our customer service billing over to the city of Arlington. The partnership we have with them on operations has been working very well. The customer service and billing is something that we were anticipated when we went into that contract and hoped to have done by the end of last year. You know all the reasons that it didn't, primarily that Fathom kind of dropped out of the picture 2 or 3 months earlier than we planned on stopping service with them. But bottom line is that we had engaged Muni Billing to take on the billing functions until we could get the transition made over to Arlington. That included doing the data transfer of all of our customers to the Arlington system and making changeouts of the reading devices, the MIUs, on each of the meters. And so what happened is that the company that was reading our meters for Fathom was reading the meters for Muni Billing as well. But they had to cease reading those for us for a number of reasons in February. And so we worked with the city of Arlington in March, at the end of March, to read on relatively short notice to manually read our meters. We'd had discussions about the potential need to do manual reading over the last 6 months, but it came to fruition that we had to do it in March, and Arlington stepped forward and started doing the meter reading. They were not able to read all of the meters for the March billing that went out at the end of March, and the reads, but we did submit the reads to Muni Billing on April the 3rd. And then we learned about this horrendous problem that we had with about 200 accounts on April the 10th. Bills went out April the 3rd. We started seeing the problems as people got their bills on April the 10th, just a couple of days before Easter. And we worked with the city of Arlington to try to determine why these roughly 200 customers were getting such incredibly large bills. And to make a long story short, we finally concluded what that was. The city of Kennedale staff, once Arlington went out and started rereading some of those 200 meters, determined that there was a problem with the way the bills were being read, and it had to do with the number of digits behind a decimal point on the meter readings. All of that to tell you there was a maybe unacceptable but rational explanation why City of Arlington jumping into this on a short notice, Aclara not being able to read our meters. It's 200 errors that we wish hadn't happened, but Arlington then went back out and started and reread as many of those 200 as they could, and those customers have been rebilled, hopefully with correct amounts, either from an actual reading that Arlington did or by estimating their readings. And so what's happened now, and we had a very productive meeting with the city of Arlington last week. They are out now, and part of the problem too was that when Arlington went out to read the meters, our meters hadn't been manually read in, I don't know how long, 7 or 8 years probably. Some of them they couldn't find, some of them had mud and water in them. They just simply couldn't locate all of them. So what they're doing now is identifying and flagging all of the meters so that when we read them manually for 1 more month, we'll have them all identified. And we intend to start that reading about the 27th of this month, so that all the meters will be read again. And for the billings, it will go out the 1st of May. So what we anticipate, and in addition to that, the city of Arlington is now making significant progress in getting all of our data, customer data, transferred over to their system. And as soon as the meter reading is done for this month, Arlington will start installing the new MIUs on each of our meters. We needed to time that right after a meter reading in order to have time to get those MIUs installed before the next reading takes place at the end of May. So we anticipate having all of the meters read starting next week manually. The next time we anticipate they'll all be read electronically by having Arlington's MIUs on those meters. We do not expect to be able to move the billing over to Arlington that quickly. Some of that customer data still needs to be transferred and those customers worked into the Arlington system. So regardless of who does the billing itself, and I anticipate that will be Muni Billing for at least another couple of months, the data will be provided to them through the new MIUs that are being installed by the city of Arlington. So bottom line is, it was an unfortunate situation. We think we've got it corrected and that the meter should be read properly this next go around. And you're probably going to see very quickly Arlington staff members, water utilities folks out installing the MIUs on everybody's meter right after the 1st of May.
And George, will we be checking for flagging for personal accounts?
Unfortunately, muni billing doesn't have all of the ability to flag or review every account, but our finance department is going to be reviewing those sheets, those accounts, and try to see if there's anything that stands out that suggests we need to hold bills up. Muni billing will be doing the same thing. It's a lesson learned this time. Again, everybody working on short notice, but the good news is that when we get this transferred to the city of Arlington, then Arlington has in their system and in their own processes now, a flagging system so that any individual account holder in Arlington, if you get a bill from them and this month their system flags if your account appears to be out of sync with what it should be and has been historically. So you can look for leaks, they can look for problems in their billing system, and that flagging is done in a very sophisticated way with the city of Arlington, and all of our customers are going to benefit from that system once we get that transition made. Again,
And the stormwater drainage?
I beg your pardon?
The stormwater drainage fee that was tacked on?
Yeah, that was on there, and that was our error, because you know that we had the hearing for that and the plans to adopt those stormwater fees in March, had it on the agenda, and had provided muni billing with all the data to incorporate that $1 charge on everybody's stormwater bill last month. Then when we had to cancel the council meeting and the ordinance did not get passed, we failed to notify muni billing to take that off and unprogram it, if you will. So that $1 a month charge was added. Muni billing has now, and Wakita, you chime in if I'm incorrect about this, but muni billing has worked to give every customer that was charged that $1 credit on that for the month of April. So
Yes, those credits are on the account already.
now, you know also, Mayor, that because we had to re-advertise the hearing for those stormwater fees, that won't appear on your agenda till your May agenda, which means they would be probably implemented and put back on the bills with that increase, assuming council approves that ordinance in June.
All right, questions, Chad?
No questions for me.
Linda?
Yes, I do. Questions, comments, whatever. For those that don't know my background, utility billing was my baby. I was the billing clerk for the city of Kennedale for many years. And when I left, due to financial reasons, I went to a different city and had different job duties. But one of the things I was tasked with there was also to audit their utility billing system. It just kind of appalls me that this is happening. You know, I know that no one's perfect and we all make mistakes. But knowing how billing systems go, this was just something that definitely, in my opinion, could be avoided. And I'll explain why. The number of digits, because of the large bills that went out, on your meter reading software, there's a field, if you will, for a number of digits for a meter. At least this is my past experience with it. When those meters are read, then the data is loaded into the utility billing software, which in the utility billing software, it also has number of digits for that particular meter. Each meter is different. But the point is the two softwares have to jive together. And if you don't, stuff like this happens. Okay, again, things do fall through the crack and things happen. Okay, we've got a new company, new billing company, new whatever, new readers, whatever the case is. But then your point of check is your billing clerk, or in this case, your billing company. There should be, and I'm surprised because I did ask for a copy of the contract with muni billing. George was completely right. They do not do a high-low meter edit check. Point one, that should have been caught right there. If it didn't, then lo and behold, guess what? You have another point of check. You print a billing register. Billing register shows everything for all accounts. It shows not only the meter readings, but also the consumption and the dollar amount. To me, that dollar amount, bottom line, even not looking at each individual water account, your grand total bill should have stuck out like a sore thumb. Okay, so we're past all that. Now we got to fix it and let's move on. And y'all know that I was one that did not vote in favor to moving to Arlington because, you know, my past, okay, I hated losing control. But in this case, I have high hopes that the city of Arlington, once they get everything over, they're going to take care of the billing, the meter reading, and all this. Due to their experience, they will have checks and balances in place. Now, the key is, what does our contract say with Arlington? I think that we need to look at that really close just to cover our butts and make sure that they're going to do these things that has caught us now. I would, you know, you might assume that it's in there, but we all know what happens when we assume things. Just like we assumed that stormwater drainage fee was going to be approved, and it didn't. So when it comes to us in May, I hope that staff holds off and makes sure that everything's approved, because you never know. I mean, there might be some council person may not want it approved at this point in time because of COVID-19. Things change, you know. We can't assume stuff. We got to be a little bit more careful and not assume. It's just really because it was my baby at one time. I'm very passionate about this part of it. Looking at my notes, see if I forgot anything on that. Going back to, okay. We had the large bills that went out, fix that, hopefully. The stormwater drainage fee, we addressed that. Now then, my mom is on the disabled rate for water. She was not one of the ones that had a large, enormous bill. But last Friday, I paid my bill and hers in the night drop. Saturday, Mom got another bill in the mail, and it was dated April the 15th. I think that was the date of the corrected bills for the high large bills. And her bill gave a credit for her disabled, senior disabled rates. It said minus $7.50 for water and minus $7.50 for sewer. And so she has a credit, $15. And I thought, well, let me look at her last bill, make sure that her discount was on there. And I thought it was, and it was. So now we have some billing, and I don't even know if any of y'all have heard about this part of it or not, but she has received a bill with another senior credit on there. It's in her favor, but still that's not right. And I don't know why it happened. So me trying to think logically, okay, let me call another resident in town that I know is on senior disabled rates. And I talked with this lady, and she was one of the ones actually that had a high enormous bill. And no, she hasn't received anything else in the mail. So that's something else that staff needs to check on, and with muni billing, I guess, to see how many of these other bills went out. I mean, and is it limited to that? It makes you start questioning, okay, well, this happened and now this did, what else is out there? There's got to be some better checks and balances is all I'm trying to say on this, because as a billing clerk, man, this just shouldn't happen. That's all. Thank you.
Nikita, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I mean, there was a lot said. I mean, my only response is that City of Kennedale doesn't have utility billing staff. And so what we have is a contract with Unibilling, and as George stated, they don't have some of the automated checks and balances. I do agree 100%
We
that
need
the register should have definitely stood out to Unibilling, and the total on that register, you know, you would notice a significant difference between that one and even the previous month. But, you know, that was somehow missed. The part about the reads, I mean, the city of Arlington, it was their first time reading for us. And so if they read 2,100 meters and 200 of them came out with the decimal place in the wrong spot, we have to figure out where that broke down. Who was supposed to notice that? We, again, you know, the city of Kennedale does not have utility billing staff or a operations person who is knowledgeable about meter reads. And so what we do have is the city of Arlington has an employee who's supposed to be dedicated to the city of Kennedale, whether they're sitting in that office or not. The city of Arlington has on their payroll an employee that they pay to manage city of Kennedale. And so when that register is sent to the city of Arlington, it needs to be reviewed as well. So it was a breakdown in a couple of different places.
Okay.
And I agree, it shouldn't have occurred. Now with this next billing cycle, my staff is going to be, of course, taking a really close look at those registers as well. So hopefully between all of those sets of eyes, we'll be able to catch any potential mistakes. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to put it out there that, you know, any particular set of next billing is going to be error-free, because we are in the process of a transition to the city of Arlington. And we won't know these things until some of these things come up, unfortunately. Now, of course, yes, with the register, we're going to review that. There's got to be a lot of more hands in the process to get our fingers around really what happened and where the breakdown is. But you know, we have to hold everybody accountable. And the people that we already contract with that's supposed to be performing some of these job duties, we have to make sure that they're doing that.
Okay. So will you check into the other thing too with the senior, please, with the disabled rates?
I will. I will check into that. If you will do me a favor and just send me an email just so that I can look at that particular account, because I don't know anything about, we didn't instruct Muni Billing to send out any updated bills other than the ones that were high for the month.
Okay, because see, you know, that all kind of goes back to, we're charged per bill that's sent out. What is it, $6 per bill? So if they're going out and sending out bills that's unnecessary, we're going to be charged for that.
And they're not, you're welcome, Linda. The bills that they resent out for the high bills, they're not charging us for those.
Good, good. Good to know.
All right. Sandra?
Sandra? Can't hear you.
How much will Arlington be charging us for billing?
For reading?
Yes.
For reading, well, the quote that they sent to us when we originally asked them to read for March was $7,700. Now, that was for the 3,200 meters that they were supposed to read. They did not read all of those meters, so we do expect for them to give us a reduced billing. They only read about 2/3 of those meters, and so they haven't invoiced us just yet, but that was the price that they quoted us. I suspect that will be the price that they will quote us to read them for the end of this month as well. So it's $7,700.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris?
I just would like to comment that I would like for us to make a concentrated effort to read the meters that were estimated last month, so that we don't have a case where the same meter goes with a guesstimate for 2 or 3 cycles, and then when it's actually read, that particular resident gets a true bill that's very large, because we've underestimated their bill as we get into the season of watering lawns and things like that. I just would like to see us put a emphasis on not estimating the same meters over and over and over for 2 or 3 or 4 months.
And Chris, that is something that we did talk to Arlington about when we had the meeting last week, and they did assure us that they would start early this time, since they know they were going to be reading for us, try to find some of those meters that are hard to find or For whatever reason, they weren't able to read them this time. So we definitely did let them know that we don't want to estimate billing. We don't want to continue to do that. So, hopefully we'll have an update on that soon.
And my other thing for you, Lakita, is I know that there's been a lot of contracts that are canceled and this and that. Is the $7,000 or so that we're paying Arlington being offset by us like not having to pay Verizon or not paying Clara? Is some of that covering that expense so that it's not really a net loss?
Yes and no. We actually did not have a contract with Verizon. When Verizon was working with Fathom, they contracted with Fathom. So we didn't particularly have a contract with Verizon. And as far as with the Clara, we don't have a long-term contract or anything with the Clara either. The only thing that we paid a Clara to do was some upfront work whenever Fathom pulled out of the picture. So those reads moving forward, they are going to be reflected as an expenditure.
But
All right, thank you.
we're not going to be paying both Clara and Arlington for reading the meters, I think is what Lakita's saying. There'll be some expense.
Josh?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, George, I'm not interested in blaming anybody. I just want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That's my key issue here. And I see that Joe Palmer has a question. So can we light up his mic?
Got it.
Hi, Joe, you're on.
Thank you for your time. I'd like to know who is the employee with the city of Arlington that she's saying has the exclusive responsibility of watching the Kennedale account? And second question is, what steps have been taken to determine how many of these bills are in error? It sounds like you don't even know how many of the bills you've got that you've got to deal with. There's probably some people out there that have an error in the bill and it's a small enough error that they don't realize it. So what steps have been taken to determine how many of these bills are in error again? Gail Uranga's bill was 5 digits. In the event of a bill that's, say, $63,456, for example, how is it likely that it is a decimal placement problem, particularly if you have hundreds of erroneous bills? And back to the employee of the city of Arlington, has anybody asked if this person makes that rate of mistakes when they deal with their own bills, with their own city? Sounds like you're not being treated with a fair amount of respect compared to how they treat their own customers.
All right, thank you, Joe. Lakita, you want to answer that question?
Sure. We have, George, I don't know if you want to disclose Craig's Cummings and his team and everybody who works for the city of Arlington.
Let me make a comment. Lakita, let me make a comment first. I think the employee that works under our contract with the city of Arlington was contracted to work in City Hall as a customer clerk, as a customer service clerk, to take bills and collect revenue so that our customers could continue to come in to City Hall if necessary. That may not be the same employee all the time. And certainly I'm not going to get into the chance of evaluating a city of Arlington employee. The ones that have been here have been very diligent.
Well, they haven't been. They haven't been diligent. She said that there's one person with City of Arlington who's responsible for the city of Kennedale. She said there's one person. Who is that person?
Well, there is an employee in the customer service for the city of Arlington, and that's not the same person. There's one in City Hall most of the time until we closed City Hall, but they have the ability to assign any of their customer service employees to this location that they want to. And so it's not necessarily one employee, although we have contracted for certainty that there would be one at any given time who is available to take customer payments in the city of Arlington.
Okay, forgive me. I think I may not have done a good enough job of asking my question clearly enough. When I asked you,
sir, you're not giving me an opportunity to respond.
Well, and this is why, because when I ask you what time it is, I don't want you to sit there and build me a watch. She said that there's one person with the city of Arlington. I just want to know who that person is so we can help in the process of determining where this problem came from. Because frankly, sir, when you make the assertion that it's a decimal placement problem, and we're talking about a bill that's $64,000, people are not stupid. We want to help assist in the process of finding out how this mistake was made, who made the mistake. That's called human resource management. We're talking about thousands of dollars.
Place to make that decision, and we've looked at all of those issues very carefully with the city of Arlington. And I frankly don't intend to divulge employees' names under this circumstance that aren't mine.
You
Okay.
refuse to cooperate.
If I may, something on that, that employee at City Hall, that's probably not their job to check accuracy of the billing. Their job, the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, George, is more of a customer service. Here, let me take your payment, and if you have questions, I'll get somebody to you. It's not check billing. It's different than a billing clerk.
That's correct. And although I'd like to know that that person in the future and going forward could help us review those accounts when they come in, that's really not what they were contracted to do when they came to Arlington. I mean, came to Kennedale.
All right. George, one real quick last question here. How much money do we still owe on the MTUs that are property of Fathom?
Those, I don't, unless Lakita knows, I don't know whether, and I'm not sure those were those were never the property of Fathom. They were our property. We purchased those MTUs that are on there now. In fact, we've talked with Arlington about as they're removed from the meters, they belong to the city of Kennedale. And we'll look for a market to market those MTUs that are going out of service. But they did not belong to Fathom. We purchased those.
All right, any other questions from the council on this issue? If not, we may take a 5-minute break before starting the next part of the council meeting. All right, let's take 8 minutes and come back and start the regular council meeting. Is that all right with everybody? Chad? Linda?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Josh? And Chris?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll reconvene here in about 7 minutes.
Linda, this is Joe again. I appreciate your effort to clarify the issue of the billing. And I came into the meeting late, but do you have an understanding, or do we have an understanding of how many of the bills are erroneous? I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Staff could better answer that question, but I believe I was under the understanding around 200.
Okay, I did hear that number. I don't know if that was a number. So that's what we believe to be erroneous. So what I was asking earlier was, aside from the decimal placement problem, you know, what if you've got some bills out there that are off by an amount that is not detectable by the homeowner or the account holder? You know, that's kind of the concern that I have. Yeah, you've got some that are crazy enough where people would call in and say, this is outrageous, this is obviously a mistake, but what about one that's like 200 more? I mean, conceivably a person might just go ahead and pay that. What steps are you going to take, or could you take to protect those people? It seems like something's got to be undertaken to where you say, okay, we know for a fact that these are the number of bills that are affected. I don't know how you do it. I mean, it seems like you'd almost have to go through every single bill manually and look at their average billing, or look at their last year's same month bill, right?
Sometimes I feel like I did that.
Oh, yeah?
You know, that's just a clerk, as a clerk, that was one of my jobs, is I checked the high-low meter edit, as it was called, and
Yeah.
there was a predetermined amount that was an average for that particular water account.
Right.
And if it went too high or too low, a certain amount, then it would pop up on that report. And that's what I always check. So it's pretty easy, but if you don't have the report, then you can't do it. So
Can you not get the report? I mean, it seems like that's the appropriate thing to do in this case, short of individually, manually going through every single bill.
well, yeah, if it's not in your contract, then they don't have to do it.
They don't have to provide the report if it's not something that the city of Kennedale specified in the contract.
That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
And I
Thank you,
don't mind.
Karen.
You're welcome. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break.
Okay, thank you for your time.
It's just
Hey, George, when you're talking, are you looking up at it like a TV screen? You're on mute. You're muted. There you go.
Now, what are you asking me if I'm looking up at my computer?
Yeah, it looks like you're looking up every time you talk.
Well, yes, my computer's up, so it's at eye level, and
Gotcha.
if I don't look down at the keyboard at that camera, then I think it looks like I'm looking at the ceiling.
Okay.
Figure this
Gotcha.
out. But like Danielle was saying, the camera on these computers is at the bottom of the screen instead of.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
So when I'm looking up at the screen, I'm looking up. Best solution, that's just I'll stay off.
So where's Brian?
Okay. 7:03. I'm running a little bit late. All right. Are we all back? Looks like it. Okay, let me just give you a warning here that when we go on recess, like we did last 5 minutes ago, please do not have discussions with callers, because that means that the entire council's listening in to something that we've gone into recess that could be considered a violation of the Open Meetings Act, because we're all still here. We have to pretend like we're all here, so be very careful about that. All right, so roll call. Leslie, you call the roll again, please.
Josh Altum,
Here.
Chris Pugh,
Here.
Sandra Lee,
Here.
Linda Rhodes,
Here.
and Chad Wando.
Here.
Here we have.
And everybody here from the last one. I don't think we need to, I think we'll skip over the pledges and the invocation, since I don't know how we would do that. And then the first item up is the Visitor Citizens Forum. This time anybody can make any comments. Do we have anybody, Leslie, that's asked to make any comments?
I don't see anything right now, no.
All right, then we'll move on from there to updates from the City Council. Josh.
How many people are on here? Is it 26?
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering, you think I can tell my story? And
Yes.
the reason why I want to tell it, because I want people to not be afraid of this thing and all that good stuff. So back in, I guess, December, early January, a couple of guys at the firehouse had a pretty good little cough, you know. And for me, it's unusual. I don't get sick very often. I had a pretty crazy little cough. Long story short, I saw a deal on the news where you could go get tested for the antibodies. And so this weekend, that's what I did. And come to find out, I have the antibodies in my system, which means, you know, it's true that I was sick with this back in January. So I tell that story because I just want people to know that don't be scared of this. Yeah, definitely still take precautions. But ultimately, if you have underlying health issues, then, you know, stay indoors, take the precautions, but don't let it ruin your life, basically is what I'm saying. So other than that, I don't have anything else. So
All right, Josh. Josh.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, Chris. I'll send the other.
I'm like, what?
My fault.
No, I guess just like everyone else, I've you know, I attended a few conference calls or different invitations that have come from some of the organizations, just trying to stay in touch with where things are going to keep people informed. You know, fielded a few questions about the situation with the water bills. Although everyone has been upset, to the best of my knowledge, the people that I've personally corresponded with the exception of one, have responded that their issue was resolved, and the other person just didn't respond back. So I know it's been tough. I want to thank George and Lakita and everyone who's been involved to try to get that resolved as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra?
Hey, I want to thank Chad and Mrs. Boyd and Curlin for making masks for the citizens at Kennedale Senior Apartments, and for Jan Joplin for going out delivering those masks. They have really been working hard to make sure the senior citizens have everything they need. And I want to say that when it comes to that billing issue, we need to think about the fact that Lakita came in July. And when she came in was when we started having issues with Phantom. Then it was time for the audit. And, you know, for people to say, you know, these are mistakes that, of course, they shouldn't have been made, but mistakes happen every day. And we need to give her credit for coming in and being able to work these issues out as quick as she has, because she has had a lot on her plate. And speaking from someone who has 3 full-time jobs now, it takes a lot. And especially when you're not feeling appreciated and you're working your butt off. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the finance department, because, you know, it takes a lot to come in and turn things around in a very short time. And so I just want to say thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Sandra.
Linda?
And I too would like to thank Lakita. Yes, and I'm sorry if that came across earlier, that I was directing that straight to you in your department. My point was there should be, and that falls on the billing company. So, you know, but if it's not in their contract, then it's really no one. So I do realize that, you know, you work hard. I always tell you I appreciate everything that you do, and big improvement from in the past. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Chad?
I'm one of the fortunate people that have been deemed an essential employee, so I get to keep working from home. But other than that, yeah, thanks, Sandra, for the shout out on making masks. Me and my wife have actually made over 1,000 of them now for residents of the city of Kennedale. And a large part of that is to donations from Jan. Gosh, there's been so many community members that have donated fabric for us to cut through. We actually went out and bought a whole nother sewing machine to get them out there, just to get as many as we could. And we've actually crossed 1,000 a while back. And we'll probably have 1,500 of them by the end of this week. So if anybody in our community need one, please just message us and we'll get them to you as fast as we can. So I know we got the fire department locked up with a bunch of them, and it's definitely our pleasure to make sure everybody is covered and staying safe. So.
All right. And then me, I also like to thank Lakita for, she was right on the ball. And, you know, the first thing she did that morning was gone down and cut off the automatic billing. That was a smart move for somebody who might have had a $3 million bill. That was a great thing. And not to mention Leslie Galloway, who got some information out there pretty quickly. And then George working to get to the root of it. And then again, a shout out to Jan and Chad, because you know, Jan reached out to me and said, what can I do to help? And she collected fabric. And I know Chad and them have been just making masks like nobody's business. So certainly appreciate that. I know there's other people, like you said, Chad. There's Sarah Bishop Cotton out there. There's Gary Mitchell. There's a lot of people out there that are stepping forward, and we certainly appreciate all those people. And now I have a couple proclamations that I have to read. Proclamation proclaiming April as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the city of Kennedale. Whereas children are our future and our greatest resource, and whereas every child deserves a nurturing family and safe environment to grow into healthy, productive members of the community, and whereas child abuse is our nation's most serious public health problems and threatens the safety of our community. Whereas the Alliance for Children has provided trauma-informed services to 2,564 children in 2019. Whereas finding solutions to prevent child abuse is a community responsibility, it depends on the involvement of all citizens. And whereas effective child abuse prevention, investigation, and treatment programs succeed because of partnerships among public and private agencies, schools, religious organizations, medical services, and the business community. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Brian Johnson, do proclaim the month of April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the city of Kennedale, and urge all citizens to work together to reduce child abuse and neglect significantly over the years to come. And that's very important right now, because one thing that we've noticed, as you well know, that during this time period, we've seen an increase in Tarrant County domestic and family violence of about 20% during the quarantine. It's one of the crimes that has actually gone up. Our second proclamation is May 16th, 2020. Pardon me?
Carol B is here with Alliance for Children. Just wanted to point that out.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. As you mentioned, the rates of domestic violence have gone up, but we also know that homes that have domestic violence, that's a risk for abuse for children. In addition, Cook Children's Hospital has seen 4 child fatalities in relation to everything that's kind of going on right now. We know that families are under an unprecedented amount of stress and sometimes financial strain, or their kids aren't at school like they normally are, and having to figure out who caregivers are and that kind of thing. And we also know that teachers are our #1 reporters. They report over 65% of all reports made about child abuse. And when they're not able to see the kids in person and really work on those relationships, we have really seen a dramatic decrease in the number of reports, even though we know that there is an increase going on right now. So we really wanted to thank the City of Kennedale for recognizing this month as Child Abuse Prevention Month, because now more than ever, we really need the message out there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Today, we're going to be blaming May 16, 2020 as Kids to Parks Day in the City of Kennedale, where May 16, 2020 is the 10th Kids to Parks Day, organized and launched by the National Park Trust, held annually on the 3rd Saturday in May. And whereas the Kids to Parks Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks, public lands, and waters, whereas we should encourage children to lead a more active lifestyle to combat issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and yeah, I'm not going to get that word out. It's something, it's important, trust me. And whereas Kids to Parks Day will broaden children's appreciation for nature and the great outdoors. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Brian Johnson, do hereby proclaim Saturday, May 16, 2020 as Kids to Parks Day in the City of Kennedale, which normally would have been celebrated by Kidfish and Bark in the Park at Sonora Park. However, these events cannot be held at this time due to the public health concerns surrounding COVID-19. I would urge staff to attempt to reschedule this event later in the year, and would urge residents to make time on this day to take their children in their lives outside to play, whether in your own backyard or in your neighborhood, state, national park, as long as social distancing measures are strictly followed. So, and if you notice, with the Alliance for Children, we also have a couple of issues on our consent agenda dealing with protecting children this time around. So we're moving straight ahead. All right, update from City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I wanted to mention is the fact that, just so everybody understands, that as we try to keep up with what's going on in the state and in Tarrant County with regard to the coronavirus, that you and several of the members of the staff are participating at least a couple of times every week in conference meetings with the county judge and other elected officials in Tarrant County, as well as with the governor and with people around the state on so that we're as knowledgeable as we can be about any changes that the governor makes in the disaster declarations at the state level or that the county judge makes here. So we participate in those conversations at least twice a week, and we'll continue to do that as long as they're having those meetings.
George, we've had 2 cases, right?
What my understanding is we've had 2 reported positive cases in Kennedale. That's correct.
All right. Next up, the consent agenda. Does anybody have any, financial reports from the city?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Rakita if she has some comments she'd like to make. Any highlights on those financials?
We've included 2 sets of financials, February and March. For February, everything looks pretty normal. We're on track with revenues and expenditures. We just want to keep in mind that being on track with expenditures still means drawing down fund balance. So we do want to continue savings in any areas that we possibly can. For March, general fund revenue and general fund expenditures are almost to the percentage the same as they were this time last year. In the water fund, however, you do notice more expenditures than fiscal 19. And I can tell you about at least I know off the top of my head, 100,000 of it is the October 1 expense that we had to Fathom for that contract. And so you will see as the year progresses, we will need to keep a close eye on the water sewer fund and any extra expenditures that were taken on that weren't budgeted for as a result of Fathom's departure and any additional contracts that we've had to take on due to that departure. We will also want to be keeping a look at, someone had already mentioned what costs are taking the place of other costs as we move to the city of Arlington. And, you know, I'm sure in the future, and George, you may want to speak to this more, we'll have to look a little bit deeper at that contract to see what those reads are going to cost us moving forward. Because with the Clara, the only thing that we were basically expending at this point was annual maintenance. Well, I'm sorry, not annual, but quarterly maintenance payments to a Clara. And so whenever a Clara departs, and we fully go to City of Arlington, you know, I don't know what that will look like as far as what, you know, additional costs we will have or whether we'll end up saving. I know that the plan is to end up saving in the long run, but until we get things sorted out, we'll want to be keeping an eye on the water sewer fund expenditures as well. Because we know that since we started the year with the fund balance projection of 31% of fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. The requirement is 25%, 15 to 25%. So we were a little bit ahead of that, but we just want to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on that. Everything with the streets fund looks normal for March. And let's see. Stormwater fund, we have a lot of, you know, capital projects that we budgeted for. We were in the process of making a list of capital projects that needed to come before council that included stormwater and water drainage programs. And we were also, we talked to the council at one point about the possibility of a bond election or something to that sort to kind of address some of the immediate issues in the city of Kennedale. And that was before COVID-19 hit us. And so we still have that list, and I'm sure that George is thinking about bringing that at a later date. But there are a lot of storm drainage projects, water projects, and things like that. Those are not particularly affected in the budget at this time, but just something that we'll want to keep in mind in case the council does desire to do a bond election this coming November. COVID-19 is obviously going to affect us, but as of the end of March, we don't know how. And we won't start knowing that until sometime in the future, depending on how long the stay-at-home order is in place and when businesses can begin to open again. George and I are looking at some of the precautions that some other cities are making as a result of COVID-19. I don't think that the city of Kennedale will necessarily have to take some of the more drastic measures that some of the cities are taking. Some of them are implementing hiring freezes. Some of them are doing staff reductions and things like that. Hopefully that's something that we won't have to look at. We know the majority of our revenue is from property tax and not from sales tax. So that's a great thing. As far as property tax is concerned, you know, everything is normal there. We're in for property tax, we've already reached 96% of our revenue there. And as far as sales tax, we're probably more than 50% there. So that's pretty good, 50% into the year. But, you know, moving forward these next few months, it's going to be real critical that we take a close look at our expenditures versus our revenue and see if we need to make some tweaks to our revenue projections and our expenditures as we move forward after COVID-19. And those are kind of all the highlights I have. If anyone has any questions about February or March financials, I'd be happy to answer them.
This question is more for George. Is George that if our property levies went up 6%, then why are we dipping into the reserve?
Well, we anticipated during the budget, and the budget that was adopted by the council, anticipated that property value, that AV increase, and it projected a reduction in the fund balance. That's what Lakita was speaking to, because the revenues that were generated by the tax rate, even though there was an increase in AV value, was not sufficient to balance the spending plan that was adopted by the city, recommended to and adopted by the city council. And it required that we dip into the fund balance anticipated when the budget was adopted. To the extent that revenues exceed those estimates, or if the carry forward from the previous year based on the audit, and I don't know the answer to this, is greater than we anticipated when we presented and you adopted the budget, that would have a positive impact on how much we had taken from the fund balance. But Mayor, while you just in relation to that, what Lakita was referring to, she and I are clearly beginning a process, and the COVID-19 thing is so many unknowns to it that we trying to look at historically how much revenue have we brought in each quarter of the fiscal year historically. How do we compare that so far this year? But the hard part is going to be projecting what those revenue sources and expenditures need to be for the last half of this fiscal year to meet our budget objectives. So we're going to be taking a look at that. And if we do need to take measures beyond what we had already taken, for instance, to freeze positions, as many positions that became vacant as we could, if we need to take other more dramatic measures, we will, but at this point, we don't know what those would be.
Any other questions for Lakita? Sandra?
No.
Josh?
No, sir.
Chris?
No, sir.
Linda?
No, sir.
Chad?
No, sir.
And we have one question from Joe Palmer. I guess. Nothing? Okay. Oh, there he is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for giving me a minute there. I'm really grateful for what I understand the city manager to say, which is steps have been taken up to this point to try to cut expenditures. Because as you're looking at your own budgetary quote unquote needs or wants, you must take more seriously the budgetary constraints faced by people who live in your city. I'm not even talking about the business owners right now. I'm talking about the people who live there, the people who are having to go to the store and spend less money and buy less food for their families. If somebody is going to emerge from this crisis, from this global pandemic, I'm telling you, it ought not be the cities. It comes down to the cities or the people. The governments are formed for the benefit of the people. And when the government no longer benefits the people, it's for the people to rise. It's for the people to prosper and for the people to be able to survive and live. So when the city manager says he has not hired anybody to replace the vacated positions within the city, how many positions are we talking about? And also, beyond that or beside that, what expenditures has the city manager cut since the beginning of this crisis? Because the reason I ask that question is you are not going to have the money to sustain the level of government that you have been accustomed to. If the people who live in your city are not going to be able to live the lifestyle or the standard of living that they've been accustomed to living, then the government must make cuts and must suffer as well. I would wager to say that there are many people involved in the city of Kennedale and cities around the country, people who don't face the same hardships as people who live in the private sector and work in the private sector. I'm talking about people who wait tables for a living, single mothers with multiple children who can't go into the grocery store with both of their kids, and they can't afford a babysitter, and they don't have anybody to watch one of their two kids. This has been an extraordinary burden that has been placed on the people, not by the virus, but by the actions of the local taxing entities as well as the state. So again, what actions have been taken by the city manager to make cuts to the budget so we can ease the tax burden on the people of Kennedale? Because when these appraisals come out, I'm telling you, people are going to flip out. And you know they are, because the appraisals are not going to be based on this COVID stuff. It's going to be based on last year. It's going to be as if the COVID virus never hit. And people are going to get those appraisals, and then they're going to see what you're going to do to them on the rate increase. You've got to make that rate down. You've got to cut it. And people are going to find out about the levy that you got from last year, that you got more taxes, that you got a tax increase from last year. You better cut your rate. I'll wait for my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any comment, George?
No, I have told the council before that we were taking measures because of our, before the COVID hit, because of our bond rating discussions. And so, and each department head is carefully evaluating every expenditure. And I don't want to leave the impression that we're leaving we don't have that many positions in the city to begin with, but 75% of our budgetary costs in most any city is employee costs. We are keeping positions vacant that we can for as long as we can, recognizing that most of our employees are in public safety, and we're not reducing public safety employees, and we're trying to fill those positions. So the other measures are being taken by department heads on a day-to-day basis, trying to save money where they can. And that's what Lakeith and I are going to be evaluating, how effective that's been.
All right, let's go to item 6, schedule of investment activity.
Lakeith, did you have any other comments about that?
No, I've included the most recent investment report for Q1 for 2020. And if anyone has any questions, I can take them now.
Anybody have a question? Chad? Linda?
Thank you.
Sandra?
No.
Josh?
No.
And Chris?
No.
No. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any items that they would like removed from the consent agenda? All right, hearing that, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with correction to ordinance number 694, the approval date.
All right, do I have a second?
I second that.
All right, so we'll take the roll. Josh? Yay or nay?
Yay.
Chris?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Linda?
Yay.
And Chad?
Yay.
All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, moving on to item F, consider the ordinance 691, amending the various ordinance of Chapter 4, buildings and building regulations. Melissa, I guess this is you.
Yeah. So this is for the adoption of the 2018 codes, the various codes that are listed there. We're currently operating under the 2015 building codes and other international codes. These are recommended by the North Central Texas Council of Governments, along with various amendments that the Council of Governments recommends through a committee they form each time these come out. I do have, I'm not a building code expert, so I have Lee Swain and Kurt Casson, I don't know if I'm saying that right, with Safe Built. I think they're online if you have any specific questions about the code specifically.
Melissa, how often do we update these codes?
I think it's every 3 years.
Okay.
And they're about to start at the next round, but we're a little bit behind on this, and Safe Built has indicated that most cities are using the 18 code, so we're a little bit behind on these. Wanted to kind of get up to the 18 code at least.
All right, let's see if we have any questions. Chad? No? Linda?
No, thank you.
Sandra?
No.
Chris?
No.
Josh?
I was say, assuming since now we outsource our inspections and all that, they requested to change them and update them.
Well, it was on our radar for a while. It was on my radar for probably the last 6 months or so, and we've delayed it a few months because of COVID. But I talked to Safe Built a few months back. We had a meeting with them to talk about, the new codes, and they did also recommend that we get up to date on those.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 691.
I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have a question from Rocky Yo. Yes, Rocky.
Yeah, my question, adopting these new codes will come at some cost, both to the commercial and residential residents. Is this a good time to be increasing the financial burden on them?
Thank you, Rocky.
We may be able to answer that. I'm not aware that there's necessarily a cost to it. Just because the code has changed doesn't mean there's necessarily an increased cost.
Can we have them pop on?
Well,
I think he's on.
can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I mean, there's typically a mixture of things that reduce the cost, as well as,
Hang on a second. Can we hold on? Can we mute Rocky, because I think we're getting some background there.
Y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Typically, there's just as many things that they may increase the cost of construction slightly, but typically each time they do a code cycle, there's enough things that bring the cost of construction down as well. So it's kind of a wash. And most of the things that are increased or changed are life safety type issues. Something happens, somebody gets injured, and so they make these changes. But every code cycle I've seen, and I've done a ton of these, it's kind of, they offset each other. So it's not really any additional cost to the trades or general contractors, developers, and owners.
I mean, my impression is from working on the other side of it is it tends to be a bit challenging for contractors to try and work under, they're working under one code for one city, another code for another city. And, the contractors are used to the current codes, the 18 codes. And so they're having to go back and look at the 15 codes for us when they've been working under the 18, in other cities.
Well, and typically, that's correct, Melissa, but typically what we do is we would get with the city and say, okay, whatever's permitted after such and such a date, there would be a grace period. We would give them plenty of time to be aware of those changes, and like I said, work with the city and say, okay, after such and such a date, these new projects need to be designed to the 2018 standards.
All right. We have a question from Joe. Can we unmute Joe?
Well, first of all, if a structure or a home is constructed with the building standards that are accepted at that time by that taxing entity, by that city, presumably that house is going to be good. They're not going to go back in and require that construction project to make adjustments structurally to the building according to the new building code. I don't think that's what Mr. Swain wants anybody to believe based on what he said.
That's correct.
What did you say?
That's correct. We would not go, but once it's done, we don't go back and make you meet the current code.
It's important that people understand that fact so that they don't.
Anything that is already constructed, I mean, we're not going to go back and implement any new code changes on those existing structures. Correct.
Okay. What was it that you said? You made a statement similar to that something about going back with the new code, with the more comprehensive code after the building was built.
I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. Let me go to something else real quick. So you're asking, you made the statement that the cost associated, the potential cost associated with a more comprehensive code in the construction process would be offset by reduced cost of materials. Could you give me a more specific example of that, or any example, real world, of where materials have gone down to the extent that it would offset a more comprehensive code? And doesn't that statement that you made confirm the fact that a more comprehensive, newer code is going to mean more cost and more time involved in the construction process?
Well, that may be true in some instances. I'm just saying, from my experience as 26 years as a building inspector, a building official, and working with numerous cities, I mean, hundreds of cities on code adoptions and different things like that, bringing the cities up to the current codes. It's always been a situation where there may be some things that cause the construction to be more expensive per square foot, and then there's always different items that negate those increased expenses, and it's pretty much a wash. I mean, they try to
always, yeah. You're saying there's always. So let me just ask you in a very simple way. Let me just try again. So in your 26 years of what you do for a living, how many years have you seen a decrease in the price of materials? Let's just go with that question.
Well, I mean, materials go up. I mean, that's not.
So they don't go down.
They can go down. I've seen them go down in the past. I mean, it just depends on, but people's wages go up, so it balances all that out. I mean, I don't really understand.
So a person makes more money, a person gets a raise based on the standard of living increase, and it's offset by the increased cost of the more comprehensive building code. Can I understand your statement to mean that?
Well, what you need to look at is safety. Most of these new changes in code are designed for safety, and then a lot of things.
I don't dispute that. Well, no, but he's answering a different question than what I asked. I just want to save some time here. I appreciate the gentleman's time explaining safety, but the question is about cost. The original question that was asked was about cost, and the statement was made that there is an offset to the increased cost of a more comprehensive code being implemented. And so first I tried to understand that to mean that the materials would go down, which was the gentleman's original statement. But then he went from materials going down to people getting raises in life generally. that would be the offset to the increased cost of the comprehensive code being applied to the projects. And so I just don't think we need to go off on the safety subject, because that is a different subject. So can we just go back to the original question? Let me just make an extraordinary amount of additional effort and ask for clarification on the statement he made that materials going down, construction materials going down, would be enough to offset the potential increase in the cost of a more comprehensive code being implemented. And again, the more simple option question, if he wants the simple option, is it is 26 years of experience. How many years has he seen the cost of materials go down in the building industry?
Well, I think that, okay, thank you, Joe. Can we mute Joe now so we can get on? And Mr. Swain, you answer that question. I don't want to continue this sort of cross-examination, but could you answer that question?
I feel like I'm being cross-examined here. I'm talking about I have 26 years of experience. I mean, as a building inspector, building official, safety is my number one priority. And I just told the gentleman that in my experience, just as many new changes, it negates anything. He's talking about, you know, yeah, things are going to go up. I mean, I don't understand the question because it's very argumentative.
Mayor,
Well, I think one thing that's very important. Sorry, I was just going to point out that actually costs have gone down in materials in the sense that the state passed on September 1st laws that basically cities could not dictate materials beyond what's in the International Building Code. The International Building Code does focus on safety and has pretty minimal requirements in terms of the building materials. So the state of Texas actually passed that laws of September 1 that we can only basically require in terms of building materials the what is in the International Building Code.
George?
Mayor, I just want to comment that I think what I heard Mr. Swain saying was that overall, the International Building Code is hundreds of pages long, and there are a lot of different elements and parts of that code. And that in his experience, generally adopting a new code every 3 years does not necessarily mean it drives construction costs up. That various things in that code, which we couldn't sit here and identify individually tonight, offset what might be trying to be painted as a code that was automatically going to cause construction costs go up. And I don't think Mr. Swain was suggesting that materials costs alone are going to cause and strike that balance. The fact is the codes need to be adopted to be consistent with modern building techniques and engineering standards. As Melissa said, as the state has changed what we can require for building material in some cases, all of those things need to be done so that as a region, we're all working on from the same page. And I think Mr. Swain was trying to say.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 691.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 691.
I'll
Do I have a second? Second by Josh. Any further discussion? All those, well, we'll take a roll. Josh?
Yay.
Chris?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Linda?
Yay.
Chad?
Yay.
Motion passed unanimously. Next item up is adoption of ordinance 692, amending Article 3 of the Fire Department Chapter 6 of the Emergency Management Services of the Kennedale City Code to authorize the establishment of mitigation fees for deployment of emergency services by City of Kennedale Fire Department.
Thank you, Mayor. I think James, Fire Chief James Brown is on the line, I hope. James?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Mayor and Council. What this ordinance is discussing is for years, insurance carriers have had riders in their insurance that would help offset costs for fire service delivered to the public. What this ordinance would allow us to do is to bill direct to insurance carriers the cost for some of our services to offset the cost of the fire department to the city as a whole. What this does is, an example on a motor vehicle accident on the roadway, it would allow us to charge based off of what type of services that we provide. And like I said, this is a rider that's been in insurance for years and years, and we just have not taken advantage of it. So I'm asking that we do move forward to bring in a little bit of revenue to offset our actual costs going forward.
All right. Questions, Josh?
No, I'm good.
Chris?
Hey, Chief Brown, what happens if you send the bill and the insurance company doesn't pay it? Do we write that off?
Yes, sir. We write that off. We do not do follow-up billing with the homeowners or the owner of the vehicle or whatever that may be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sandra?
No question.
Linda?
As it relates to Councilmember Pugh's question, in the staff report, it says in some circumstances, the responsible party might be billed directly. So if we're not, when would that happen then?
Let's say we had an 18-wheeler driving down the road here, and it's ABC Fuel Carriers, and he crashes on the side of the road. We go out and do spill mitigation, any sort of work that we attain to that. If that particular person does not have an environmental rider on his insurance, we could, in these cases, bill them direct to try and recover some of the costs.
Okay, and then just one more question. What other cities are doing this now?
City of Denton is one of the largest ones in the area that does it. Lake Worth does it. Oh goodness. There's about 12 different cities in the Metroplex areas that are presently doing it. I hadn't seen any of the large cities do it like Dallas or Fort Worth or Arlington, but it is normally some of the smaller cities that take advantage of it.
Okay, thank you.
Chad?
I guess my only concerns with this is, like, when this first got brought up, I called my insurance carrier to ask what my personal coverage would be on this, and my rider for it on my home would be a limit to $1,000 in fees. So I just want to make sure that from a citizen standpoint that, if the insurance pays for it, great. That's what insurance is for. But I would hate to see someone get billed for something after they just lost everything.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure the language is right for anything that we do, that, it's capped at limits that are authorized by the insurance policy. And then, just things like that. Because, the last thing anybody wants to think about is, well, what's it going to cost me to have the fire department come help me tow my car out or take me to the hospital, and my car's on fire, and how much is it going to cost me to damages? That's the last thing people need to be thinking about in an emergency like that situation. So.
Sure, absolutely. Our legal has already vetted the ordinance as well. So,
yeah, as long as like I said, as long as a bill doesn't come past the insurance company to the direct to the citizen, I'm okay with that. That's insurance's job. But I don't want to see anybody get a bill for, oh, by the way, the insurance didn't pay X amount of dollars. So.
Absolutely.
Hey, Chief, I got a question.
Sure.
So basically, this is for, say, for instance, large scale incidents. So say we have a huge structure fire at a warehouse over here, and we lose hose and equipment and all that. So that's another tool that we can go to that company and bill their insurance to help pay for our tool. Or, for example, like you were saying, say a hazmat spill. So we got to contract a hazmat company to come out and clean up that spill. We can then turn around and bill that company for cleaning up the hazmat, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It'll also, like I said, depends on what the insurance rider has. we can bill for equipment on the scene, personnel on the scene as well.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 692.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 692.
That's from Josh. Do I have a second?
I second it.
A second from Sandra. And we'll take a roll call. Josh?
Yay.
Chris?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Linda?
Yay.
Chad?
Yay.
Motion passes unanimously. Last item is conduct a public hearing and consider approval of resolution 569 authorizing funding participation with the Tarrant County Community Development and Housing for the 46th year of the Community Development Block Grant CDBG project for rehabilitation of water lines in the 400 to 600 blocks of 3rd Street. Do we have any? I'll open the public hearing. Well, we'll have Larry talk about it first and then do any public hearing that we need. Larry?
Council, I believe Leslie's going to put the slideshow up for us. Oops. There we go. Yes, this is the 46th annual CDBG project year 2020 for the water line improvements, 400 block to 600 blocks of 3rd Street. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
That's all right. The project consists of removing over 1,200 linear feet of 2-inch galvanized water line, which has been a maintenance problem, and abandoned in place over 1,300 linear feet of 12-inch asbestos cement water line, and replace those with over 1,300 linear feet of 12-inch PVC, as well as new valves, fittings, service lines, and meters. The red line here depicts the project scope of 3rd Street here near the community center. So, next slide. Here you see a map of the city limits of the city of Kennedale, and the area in yellow is the area that meets the low to moderate income criteria level for projects for consideration. And the red line shows 3rd Street as our project location. This map shows your state residential service levels. And it's interesting to state that these are state codes and not the city's zoning codes that are being shown. But it shows the 12-inch and the 2-inch water line. Most notably, there was a question in the presentation in February. That was actually when myself and the engineers were looking at a project. We were going to do the entire length of 3rd Street. And due to cost, we had to pare it down to part of it. And that erroneous code was a piece of property that was outside of the scope we're discussing here. Next slide. And the cost and funding. I'm glad I have this with me because the screen is blocked. Total project cost is $313,512. And we expected or assumed an amount of $160,000 as our CDB grant match. The mayor being the chair of that committee, I guess saw to it that we got the maximum amount of $180,000. So the city's matching amount for this project is estimated to be $133,512. And that's the slide presentation. Do you have any questions?
Now, if we can remove the slide presentation now. And public, I'll open the public hearing to see if we get anybody willing to ask any questions on this. Wait a minute, because we've got a little bit of a slow system here. All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion, I'll close the public hearing, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 569.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 569.
I'll second.
Motion by Chad, second by Chris. Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Josh?
Yay.
Chris?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Linda?
Yay.
Chad?
Yay.
Motion passes unanimously. Now all I need is a motion to adjourn. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll do that.
All right, thank you,
Motion
Josh.
to
Do I have a
adjourn.
second?
Second.
All those in favor, Josh?
Yay.
Nice shorts, Josh. Chris?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Sandra?
Yay.
Linda?
Yay.
And Chad.
At least he had pants on. Yay.
All right, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.